I want to start with what I witnessed yesterday. First of all, it was amazing to be here for 2 services. I have never done it in my own place, 2 services. But what was wonderful was this a minute or 2 minutes when people said hello to each other, which when I tried to institute this about 15 years ago in Temple, Israel, I got calls the next day. We're like church people. What are we doing? What are you? And now it's natural at Temple Israel, but it was so warm and great feeling to have this kind of camaraderie and friendship. It was wonderful. Any feedback on anything you wanted to say about what I spoke about yesterday? I apologize a few times during the sermon to make sure I don't depress you or upset you. Yes?
I had a friend in college who took philosophy and they taught her that there should be a difference between hope and faith, and that faith was stronger because they carried over hope can be dashed. What do you think about that?
We just don't feel so comfortable with the word faith. Am I right? Yeah. Yeah. Thank God I have 2 Jewish women. I think if you look at 4,000 years of Jewish history, hope was at the center. So even if sometimes God disappointed us, we still kept the hope. And God disappointed us a few times. Shall I give you the date? I mean, let's start in the year 70 CE when the temple was destroyed, the second temple. There was the first destruction of the first temple. So we continue being Jewish despite of God. So hope is at the center, at the core. It's in our DNA. We have other parts of the DNA that are not so pleasant, but the hope is good. So that's how I would put the change, the difference. Yes.
I appreciated your talk because obviously you're explaining what Jewish people believe, and isn't that why we're going to the Tri-Faith to understand?
Absolutely, beautiful.
Judaism, and I'd like to hear from the mosque also, Imam.
And he's coming next Sunday.
Yes.
He's coming for 2 weeks, and he's a lovely man. You'll enjoy him very much.
Does he have twice as much to say then than you did? Because you only got
No one has more to say. The sermon was about the Messiah, Jewish view of Messiah. For those of you who did not come to services.
We would have warmly welcomed you.
Absolutely. Okay. I will go over the manuscript and send it to Eric, and then if someone wants to read it again, slowly, and in the intimacy of their home, it'll be available. Thank you. So, Shmot. Shmot is the name of the second book in the Bible. Shmot is the names, but actually we translate the second book as what in English? Exodus. I love the real name of the book, which is the names, because it starts with the names of all of those descendants that came to Egypt, all of the family of Jacob, and so that's the name of the book, the names. I think Exodus is a lot more palatable, powerful, because that's actually the centrality of the book, the Exodus from Pharaoh. And so let's look again. Again, Me'or Einayim. I love this Hasidic writing because he's consistent in how he unpack mysticism in our eyes. So who would like to read? What is Egypt? I mean, we're going to understand now how mystical interpretation of what Egypt is all about. Egypt, already you know, define for me what Egypt was for the Israelites.
Slavery.
Slavery. What else?
Exile.
Exile.
Darkness.
Darkness.
Bottom of the barrel.
The bottom of the barrel.
Serving a master.
Serving a master, a different master. A different master. Yeah. Well, they didn't know that. Yeah. There was surprise. I'm bringing you to Mount Sinai. Guess what? You're getting a new master. You're going to become slaves to God. That's really what, you become a person that has to obey God's commandments. So how is this different than Pharaoh? There are a lot of differences, but we'll go there. So who would like to start reading? Please.
We all know the secret meeting of our exile in Egypt.
Yeah, isn't it a wonderful opening line? We all know the secret meaning. Are you kidding? But that's what a way to attract the reader into understanding it. And what is it?
Awareness itself was in exile.
Wow. Awareness. That's the whole purpose of the book of Exodus, is about a new awareness, about opening the eyes and paying attention to what really matters in this life. From time to time, we have those kind of waves of discovering awareness in our life, and it doesn't come in a comfortable time. It's in our face. It's like, stop, hello, what are you doing? Where are you going? Those are great moments in our lives. And I know they're shocking and sometimes disappointing, but we need to have it. We need to have those moments. That's how we grow. We grow from those moments. When we become completely aware of the person we are married to, of the children we have, of the environment, of the White House. Okay. That was nice this morning to discover who is indicted. That was such a joyous moment in our lives. Awareness. Continue, please.
We knew nothing of the Creator or His Torah. In the generation of the flood, people had said, "What is God that we should serve Him?" Job 21:18. Even though Torah hadn't yet been given in the generations before the flood, it existed in this world as the power of the maker within the made.
What is he saying here? Why is he waiting? Why is God waiting all the way to the book of Exodus to reveal himself? What was the problem in the generation of the flood? There were no righteous people. Yeah. Noah was above average. That's it. But sometimes people above average get responsibility on their shoulders. He was not capable to understand the larger scheme. That's why we talked last week about Abraham, the beloved of God. So that's why God had to wait a little bit. Go on.
It had not yet been garbed in specific worldly forms, such as it would have after being given.
Well, again, the word garbed. Do you understand now the mystical meaning of the word garbed? Hello? No. Okay. So everything was revealed in the beginning already, except that as a result of the shattering of the vessels where the extra light was put into, because God in his love of us shrunk himself and allowed for us to be created in the space that was left out of the original creation light. So what happened is, we are not capable of really absorbing, or it's almost like the celestial. Few weeks ago, when was the last,
The eclipse?
when was it? A month ago? How did we witness that sun? Hopefully, because all of us are still being able to see, none of us is blind, there was a glass or glasses that were prepared for that occasion. I remember when I was young, we will take a candle and put a piece of broken glass that we broke just a few minutes before and make it dark, and then look at this. because we all were afraid. That's how we did it in the ancient time when I was young. So that's a good way of explaining the garbage. There are terms and there are things in our world, in the world that God created, that it's too hard for us to look at straight. Because maybe we can become blind in a way, or become crazy. Therefore, God created those dresses over some words and some meanings and some events in life that in the first reading we don't get it. But that's there to protect us from being able to look at this straight. So the garbing, I mentioned the chair or the table. For the naked eye, this table is a table. But this is where people in this church get together and break bread and create relationship with each other. That's how I see it. And I'm sure there are people that are capable of seeing this table in a very different way than I just explained. So those are the things that have layers and layers, and we need to unpack it. But God, in God's love of us, helped us by not creating this first look that can be overwhelming, where you become really incapacitated to explain anything. So that's the garbage. So what is he saying here? There were no specific worldly forms at that time, at the beginning of creation, to be able to dress all those things. That's why he waited a little bit longer. Continue, please.
But there were certain select individuals who fulfilled Torah just as it exists above, having come to grasp it through their own expanded minds.
But from time to time, you have in this world people that get it. I mean, it's this interesting phrase we tell people. Aren't you getting it yet? No. And then you can have a person that sees exactly the same, that already is beyond getting it. We all, we all had those moments in our lives when we are looking at something or analyzing an event and we don't get it. And then some commentator on TV gets it. Between commercials about medication. So, who are they suggesting was able to get it? Who is the key player in Exodus? Moses. And Freud, by the way, wrote a beautiful book about Moses. Have you read the book about Moses by Freud? Oh,
yes.
yeah, of course he did. He actually opened his mind and described why was he capable of getting what no one else got. By the way, you need to know that even Moses, in his, as great as he was, still, according to tradition, his higher intellect only touched the bottom of the intellect of God on Mount Sinai. So even Moses got only part of what God was all about. But, I mean, we're so far away of getting what Moses got. So let's work first on the level of Moses. Forget about God. Continue, please.
They understood its true inner essence as it was before it was given. Such people were Methuselah, Enoch, and Adam, who were all students of Torah.
Yeah, isn't it nice? You never knew that Adam was studying Torah. What do you think? What else he has to do in paradise? I mean, it was a perfect place to study Torah. Go on.
But at the time of the flood, humans were so wicked that they cut both world and Torah off from their connection to the Creator.
Yeah, that's why Exodus is happening after Genesis. Go on.
Both world and Torah were separated from their root. That is why the flood came to destroy the world.
Now you understand the word root. What is that? God. That's the root. That's the core. That's another way of the mystics describing God in a different name. The root of everything. Yes, please.
Is Torah a shard of the light, or is it?
Torah is the blueprint of the world.
Okay,
There was Torah before the world was created.
right.
So the Torah is there. What I describe about the breaking of the vessels is the way mystics look at the creation of the world.
Okay, I got it. Okay, I see what you.
Just because other people are using Big Bang doesn't mean that it's not according to the mystics.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I want you guys to release yourself from the shackles of science for a while. I mean, you can do it at the same time. You can have a scientific explanation to the world and still trying to understand the mystics. Although there are some scientists who are extremely religious and they can do it. God bless them. Let's continue. The next reader, please. A good and strong voice.
Where was Torah cast down at that time?
Okay, here's the question. Where was Torah at that time? And here comes an answer.
It fell into the shell of Egypt. That is awareness in exile, for the Torah represents awareness. And this is why Israel had to go down into Egypt to raise up fallen Torah.
Yeah, so remember about the shells? I mean, the vessels were shattered. And so the world became full of shards and sparks of the original creation light. And so guess where the Torah fell? It fell into Egypt. So this is why they ended up there. Remember how they got there? Through Joseph. Remember he's coming out of his father's tent, and the father told him to go look for his brothers. And he meets this mysterious man that tells him they went this way. And he goes that way, and he ended up in Egypt. So Joseph is a great instrument in the hands of God in bringing all of the Israelites, all 70 or whatever, how many families members, into Egypt. They needed to get to Egypt. So already you understand that every step in the Torah, every page, every verse in Genesis has one purpose, to bring the Israelites into Egypt. Because the purpose was to save the Torah out of there. So you have to go to exile. And by the way, I mean, you know, how many times when we had to move from city to city or from country to country, we became a lot more aware of where we are. I mean, staying in one place, being stuck in one place, sometimes can bring a lot of blindness. So they needed to get out there. They needed to suffer. They needed to realize that there's something else in the world. And by the way, why wasn't the Torah given in Egypt? Why he has to drag them to a mountain, Mount Sinai, only there to get the Torah, according to the story? Who is going to pay attention to the Torah if you're a slave? I mean, you have to accept the Torah in complete freedom. I mean, the escape from freedom. So that's why they needed to go through the suffering period. And that's why the book of Exodus is a little bit thicker. Okay, let's continue.
Once we came out of Egypt, we brought awareness forth from exile, even though we were indeed still exiled. Awareness is not, except for those so totally lost as to deny reality.
Yeah. So that's again the idea of the exile. Even if you leave Egypt, I mentioned this before, it was easy to leave Egypt, but it was very hard to get rid of Egypt inside of every one of the people that left Egypt. I still think that this is one piece that we Jews are still working on. I think we have some traumas in our DNA that started in Egypt and we're still there sometimes. Sometimes and I think this is where I see the beautiful activity of tri-faith. It is possible that only with being next to each other we can get rid of some of the traumas that we still have, we Jews. And by the way, you're not lucky too. You guys have them too. I think there is a way of helping each other by being next to each other. It is possible that there will be a level of healing and a level of understanding and awareness that will help us get from our own exiles. Exiles from God, exiles from each other. Just because we're in America doesn't mean we're not in exile. Exile is more complicated, more packed word. I love being in exile. I still look at the place I was born as home, but I'm here now. I think it added a dimension to, this is what led me to do what I'm doing. I think the exile from Israel, not being there, not being at my homeland, created anxieties and a search and trying to fall into my own place. I wonder if I would ever be a rabbi if I stayed in Israel. Actually, no chance. No chance. It's a different kind of religion there. And so exile, not for everybody, can be a wonderful thing. And sometimes we need to force ourselves to go into exile in order to be someone else. As my professor, I had a teacher in the seminary. He was a historian, an amazing man, Jacob Marcus. And the night before ordination, he invites the boys, he calls us, the boys. Invites everyone to his house and gives us the final speech before the ceremony on the next day. And he says, I have one truth to tell you. Always try to be who you are. But if you are a schmuck, be someone else. And that was the speech of inspiration.
Did that make you aware of anything?
Totally. On that moment, we all became aware. Sorry for using that word. Please continue.
For most people, only the personal attributes which express that awareness remain in an exiled state. These include love, fear, glory, and the rest. Everyone knows that God exists, and he has some degree of awareness.
Okay, so there were characteristics in humanity at that time, such as love, fear, glory, and the rest. It doesn't go into explanation. So they knew that God exists, but there was a very limited kind of knowledge. It was a surface knowledge. There was some degree of awareness on the part of Methuselah, Enoch, Adam, and maybe some other people, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to create a movement, to create a religion, to create this awareness of God in God's fullness. Continue.
Everyone knows that God exists and has some degree of awareness. Yet our qualities of acting remain exiled. We have improper loves, improper fears. These qualities are imprinted within us only for the service of God, but we use them to violate God's will.
Yeah, so, and therefore, what happened on the bottom of Mount Sinai? What is the Torah for the Jews? What is the Torah? I mean, you sometimes, what?
The blueprint, God's.
The blueprint, but also the laws. I mean, the commandments, the mitzvot, how to behave. I really, if you want to know how to be Jewish, you open a book and you see exactly all of the 613 commandments and you just follow it. Oh, easy said than done. Yeah. I mean, of course, you have to use also your mind to be able to understand all this. So it's really easy. It wasn't easy always, but it's easy to be a Jew because it's all written for you. And if it's not written for you, you have commentators, you have individuals that constantly wrote books. That's why, I love when I'm introduced sometimes in a church. This is Rabbi Azriel. He's from the people of the book. I get up and I say, books, lots of books. That's what I'm teaching in UNO. I'm teaching, and it's amazing to see the difficulty of the students realizing that we have more than just the Old Testament. And so I give them a survey of all the rest of the books, and they're completely lost. I just gave them the midterm. I got the results back. We need to immerse a lot deeper into that. I mean, but it's okay for a first shot.
Rabbi, then are all of these books equal in importance?
No. I mean, you have books. First of all, they're written. No, what I'm saying is, if one wants to know how to behave or what to do in relationship to God and relationship to humanity, then there are books that tell you one after the other, and there are more books that interpret what those books say, and there are more books that disagree with this book. You have two Jews, you have three opinions. So there is a treasure, really, there's a treasure of information and awareness that is available to us. And it's not in Hebrew only. It's in English now. So you don't have excuse not to do it. Yes?
Explain sin to me in Judaism. And
Sin.
the result of sin, because you have all these laws, all these rules. If you don't live up to them, is there a punishment?
Is there consequence?
Explain it.
How many hours we have? Just on the topic of sin. So the word sin in Hebrew is chet. There are other words. Depends on the level of sin. I mean, there's all kind of words, and Hebrew is such a rich language that for every kind of a level of sin, there's another word. But I'll go just with the word sin. Sin is, in a way, the word means missing the mark. Missing the mark in Jewish understanding. And so if there is a punishment, of course, there's always a punishment. Every time we commit some kind of a sin, if it's gossiping about a friend or disobeying something, there is something that happens to us. That's why we go to a therapist. What is the role of the therapist? He is like a little God. He tries to unpack the things that we commit and helps us understand our lives. I'm not joking. I mean, they are very helpful. That's why there are so many Jews who are therapists. We have been in that business because we had to deal with God from an early stage. So is there punishment? Yeah, it is possible. The difficulty we have is that we don't see the punishment the way God sees it. We want to see the punishment of evil people now, here. Yeah, because we have such a short timeline, and if it's not happening while we are alive, we're not enjoying it. But you heard about second, third, fourth generation. God remembers the iniquity of people for fourth generation, maybe more. So maybe if it's not happening now, too bad, you missed the show. But it will happen later. Now, is God involved? There are two kinds of mitzvot, of commandments that we Jews have to obey. We have commandments in relationship to God, but most of our commandments are in relationship to each other. So the Day of Atonement, which just happened, and for me, it happened in Kauai. That's the best place to spend the Day of Atonement. I recommend to all of you. I mean, what's better than that island? God will not find me there. The Day of Atonement atones for the sins we commit against God. That day, cleanse your slate. The Day of Atonement does not atone for the transgressions we commit against each other. That's where our work has to be done. We have to worry less about our relationship with God and more about relationship with God's creatures on earth. We have spent too much time talking about God, not enough time in the work we have to do with other people. That's where the book, I mean, oh my God, the last 2 years we introduced in the Reform movement a new machzor, a new prayer book for the Day of Atonement. You have to see the page, I mean, it's like heavy. And most of it, 80% of it, is about us, not about her. It's about us. And we don't get it. We don't get it. That's why we need to do work. That's why we have a period before the days of awe in what we need to do. It's a hard work for the Jew that is have to pay attention. It's more than just sending a card or saying, I'm sorry. I love this with my children. My son gives me this. He's in the University of Iowa. If I did something, forgive me. Wait, Yaniv. Not so fast. Let me remind you what you have done. Oh, no, I don't have time. I have a class. That's not how it works. You have to confess. You have to show contrition. You have to show that it's a hard work. There is a book about how to ask repentance. It was written in the 11th century by an amazing rabbi, where in Spain. I love the Spanish rabbis. I love the Spanish music from last night. And so the idea is to, his name was Rabbi, just a second, Rabbi Yonah from Gerona. He lived in the word Gerona or Gerona, and he wrote a book, 2 volumes of the ways to get completely out of any kind of sinful feelings. I mean, it's like complicated book. It's in English. That's another book, Repentance. 2 volumes about repentance. It's not, I'm sorry. That doesn't work. Anyway, that's a little bit about sin. We can definitely go into a full year of talking about this.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
When you were just talking, you used the word sins against God and transgressions against each other.
It's the same. I'm sorry. Yeah. I just used different word. Yeah, it's the same. It's
sins against people and sins against God.
it's the same challenge. Yeah, but again, the challenge is larger in our relationship than God can take. God has taken a lot of shit from us. I think God is going to be okay. Let's stop worrying about God. God is big enough to take care of himself. We are the ones that are facing the real hard work. Please continue. Someone else from That Is Why.
That is why the Torah continually admonishes us to recall the day you came out of Egypt.
It appears so many times. That line, the day, we need to remember the day that we came out of Egypt. In every generation, this is part of the Passover celebration. In every generation, one needs to see himself as if he left Egypt. So we are commanded never to forget the day that we left Egypt. That's a huge commandment. What's the purpose of that teaching? Why would I, in 2017, really care to remember that I left Egypt? I wasn't there.
Because that was the day you chose to step away from
That shell. Beautiful.
And break out and
To awareness. Absolutely. So I need to see myself as if I just left Egypt yesterday. So, what is my response to that exit, to that exile? By the way, Egypt was yesterday. For many of us, those Egyptian moments are happening many times in our lives. We don't call it Egypt, but that's Egypt, the darkness. That's the power of that symbol, that image. Continue.
This is counsel on how to extricate these qualities from exile as well. If every one of us remembered that awareness itself was once in exile, but came forth from it, and we became aware of God's existence, it would be easier for us to bring those personal qualities as well into goodness and away from evil.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's it. You know what? How many of you left Egypt? All of you. All of us left Egypt. We know this from the text because it says that the Israelites were joined by a multitude of other people. All of us came out of Egypt. Egypt, modern Egypt or ancient Egypt, it doesn't matter. We all went through this exile. And if we are not, something is happening. And so this awareness helped us discover what are the personal qualities that we need to exhibit, that we need to have once we are aware. And the last sentence.
We would then use them, those personal qualities, only in ways that accord with awareness of God.
Yeah, God was the key player in that exile. What is my relationship to that God that redeemed me? God that saved me from completely being in the mud. And let's continue. Reading? I need a reader. You guys do so well. Come on.
This is what Ben Zoma meant when he
Ben Zoma was a rabbi.
interpreted, so that you recall the day you came forth from Egypt, all the days of your life.
All the days of your life. So again, remember how those rabbis work? They give you a quotation in Deuteronomy. Okay, continue.
The days, he said, suffices to tell us to remember every day. All the days is there to include the nights as well.
Yeah, so you can interpret the phrase, you shall recall the day you came forth from Egypt, but then why there was a need in the text to add all the days of your life? I mean, it's a repetition. There's no reason to, it's redundant. So the rabbi explained why those two words. So it's not only
Hello, we're trick-or-treating.
beautiful.
Do you want us to come around, or are you in the middle?
I'm in the middle, and we don't have any candies to give, so I don't want the kids to start crying here.
Hi guys, hi guys. Guys. Hi guys. Hi.
They're beautiful.
Aren't they? Hi. Hi.
Or grandparents too, beautiful.
I dressed up just like that at Christmas, one Halloween. Had a pink tutu and everything. In fact, I have pictures.
That's one holiday that I'm still struggling with. Actually, I'll get my grandchildren to come, and I don't think we have candy, so we need to start. Yes, please.
Would coming forth from Egypt and remembering it all the days of your life, would that be somewhat parallel to the Christian idea of being reborn?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the Christian idea came directly from this, but it was a birth. I mean, I think the exile for the Jews that were the Israelites or whoever got exiled from there. By the way, I'm sorry also to tell you, it is possible that Egypt never happened. I mean, there are definitely scholars that have been trying to trace any evidence that it actually happened. It doesn't matter. It's in the book. It's there. It happened. And if it didn't happen, who cares? I mean, even if Passover never happened, we still are not going to be able to not have Passover seders. I mean, you know, A few years ago, I did the Passover here. It was, I remember that. It was wonderful.
Rabbi, with this.
Let me just finish
Sure.
that. So all the days. So what the rabbi suggests that it's also the nights. Even at night, you need to remember that you got out of Egypt. So that's why the days appear twice. Yes.
I was just wondering if this related to remembering the times in our lives that were really, really hard or bad, and that we got through it, that God brought us through to the other side.
Wait, do we need to be told to remember them? How many of you forgot your dark days?
But the idea,
We live with them. We live with all the darkness in our lives. Yes.
It would also mean to remember the rest of your life is to learn from the past.
Oh my God, totally.
Remember what happened, and it could happen again.
Yeah, but this is deeper because it's Egypt. I mean, the Egyptian story is such a good narrative for all of us, but not only for us. We used to have in Temple Israel Passover Seder with the black community. Oh my God. They understood the story of Pharaoh in a whole different, deeper way than the Jews. So we created Haggadah that was both the black experience and the Jewish experience. So I mean, I'm saying the Egyptian piece is deeper because as a result of it, we became servants of God. Until then, we were servants of Pharaoh. Why do you think the 10 plagues are happening? It's a little bit of a muscle exhibit by the part of God against Pharaoh. God wanted to destroy them completely. If God is going to win, He's going to win all the way. Until all the chariots and Pharaoh himself drown. I mean, it's a vicious struggle against Egypt. But Egypt is not just the country, it is the concept. Sometimes you need to obliterate the entire Egypt, the entire darkness from your life in order to be able to win the light, the sparks, the holy sparks. Let's finish.
Day is a time when the mind is clear, a time when we follow its directives. But we need to remember our liberation from Egypt at night as well, when in darkness. If we then recall the existence of a great and awesome God who created everything out of nothing and in whose hands all remains, night will shine like the day. Psalm 139:12. For us, and we will come forward from darkness.
Yeah. How many people like darkness? It's amazing what you can do at night. It's interesting in Jewish tradition, there are a few services, few rituals that have to continue throughout after 12 o'clock at night. One of them is the Passover Seder. You're not supposed to, okay, that's it. No. You have to read the entire Haggadah, the entire narrative, the entire story about the redemption of Egypt until you cross the hour of 12 at night. Because there is a tradition, we also have the tikkun. There's a ritual called tikkun a few times a year where you have to pray beyond 12 o'clock. It's like sunrise, what is this? Sunrise, yeah. Why? Because according to the mystics, God is closer to earth at 12 o'clock at night. So you better hit God then. It's like those games that we used to have. You know, you shoot your prayers at 12 o'clock at night and after 12 o'clock at night. The idea is to keep those kids and adults awake so they can read the whole story. Passover is still the most celebrated holiday among Jews, more celebrated than the Sabbath. There's something about the narrative of Passover that is so powerful that you are sucked into it every year. Yeah. Azriel.
Splitting hairs for sure. Recall the day you came out of Egypt. how is that different from remember you were slaves?
It's another way of attacking the same issue.
thing?
Yeah, totally, the same.
Okay.
Remember that you were a slave. I mean, the introduction there is to slavery, where you were not free. But I still think that we went into a different slavery. I mean, I think that we substituted in Egypt one master to another master. I think if you call yourself, if we see ourselves as servants of God, then as a servant, you have some responsibility. And there is a yoke. There's a burden. Definitely there's a burden if you see yourself in relationship to God as a servant. Because the other option is to do what? To go to Karl Marx. And to be free. Yeah. Any one of us is free? Even the person that doesn't believe in God is not free. None of us is free. We get our freedom by having some kind of a discipline. In Judaism is the commandments. Okay, nice reading. Now there's another piece here. Look at Or Torah. That's a different book. I'm sorry there's no pages, but that's what it is. Look at Or Torah. There's a phrase. Every one of them starts with a quotation from the Bible. Who would like to read that? You see it? It starts with, he met him, Aaron and Moses. Who would like to read this? And then go to the explanations.
Aaron met Moses, at the mountain of God, and he kissed him. The reality of God was revealed in Egypt as it is revealed through creation. Of this, Scripture says, I will pass through Egypt on that night, and we are taught, I and no angel.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, God has, in the book of Genesis, definitely with Abraham, we meet God messengers. There's an angel of God that does things. An angel of God called Abraham and said, Abraham, Abraham. It wasn't God. Almost like God doesn't want to do the dirty business. So he sends angels. But when he came to Egypt, it's clear that God is involved in that. He didn't send any angels. And so continue.
This had to come about through God's own self, since they were surrounded by such defilement and chicanery that no angel, but only God, had the power to redeem them.
Yeah, totally. Be aware. That's why maybe we need to remember Egypt. Because God was active at that part of history. I mean, angels too, but angels are secondary. They are still sent. The Jewish view of angels is very different than what we encounter in other faith communities. I mean, they only function as a result of God's will. They don't act on their own. They don't, and angels, according to some tradition, every angel has one mission. After the mission, he's done. Or she's done. How come we never talk about angels as all women? They'll be nice. A lot more comforting, isn't it? Yeah.
I always thought they were. No.
So, very important to remember that God is there. Continue.
This was testimony to a created universe, one in which God could, by will, reverse the course of powerful forces.
Yeah, and that's what happened. That's what the Egyptian story is all about. Changing the course of history. Please continue. Anyone else, please?
This revealing of God had to come about through a joining of love and restraint, giving the Israelites the power to both receive and withstand God's presence, as was true in creation.
Okay, remember now, the light is too bright. The light that was put aside as a result of God's love for us was too hard for us to bear. That's why things are garbed. We can't handle it. There are things we cannot handle. Why do we use this phrase sometimes? You can't handle it. How do we know that? What is the meaning of you can't handle it? It's too much. It's too big. You're not going to understand this. That's exactly the purpose of garbage, of dressing it up. It's too much. By the way, have you ever tested a person after you told them you can't handle it? It's amazing what people can handle. Amazing. No one dies from bad news. I never saw a death that happened as a result of bad news. It's such a voice for a cantor. It's absolutely
Believe it or not, this is her happy sound that she does when she plays.
beautiful.
All the time.
Save money for cantorial school. It's the purpose of the grandparents.
Musicians.
Excellent. So let's continue.
Even though these two forces appeared simultaneously as the world was created, two vessels were needed to contain them. This was how the worlds emerged. All that was simply, what? All that
A simple
was
unity.
Simple unity in the higher world, like the singularity of thought appeared in a lower world as more fragmented. This was the result of these distinct vessels, but above they remain united to this day, just as thought remains single within the heart.
Let me explain here. There is a complete replica of all of you up there. There was always an understanding in mystical thought that we are parallel to something that exists above us. That there is one of you up there, there is Omaha up there is a Tri-Faith Initiative up there is Jerusalem of High and Jerusalem of Low. That's why we part of the end of the prayer on Passover next year in Jerusalem, it was not always a physical Jerusalem. It was also the kingdom of Jerusalem, the kingdom on high. There is Jerusalem up there. So this was a mystical teaching that said, whatever you do here, it's affecting exactly what's happening there. There is a correlation. There is a relation between our work here and what's happening there. So it comes from, I know, it's a little bit, okay, I know, it can be done into a movie. Anyway,
it is a good movie.
let me continue explaining it. What happened, I mean, you have only on chapter 3 in Exodus, the line that says, when the Israelite cried out to God, God remembers them in Egypt. If there is no cry coming from down here, nothing is going to happen up there. There is a symbiotic relationship between this world and the world above. So there is a need for the cry. What is the line? God remembers them. God doesn't know where the Israelites are? Hello? They are 430 years slaves in Egypt. What, God forgot about us? You need to have the cry down here to be able to effectuate changes up there. That's the mystic belief. Nothing is happening higher if it's not happening down here, which is a great way to get people involved in what? In justice work. You want justice to appear on earth, you better start doing it, and then it will appear up there. It's a whole different view of the world by the mystics. You see why it's so hard to teach Kabbalah. Rabbi, teach Kabbalah. You know, it's complicated. You need to have some of the basis of Judaism to be able to understand how we got to that level of understanding, mystical understanding. So the Egypt piece was needed in order to draw God into the redemption. Why would God suddenly, after 430 years of the Israelites being slaves in Egypt, suddenly now intervene? God needs a lot more convincing to come down and help us in changing our lives. But it has to be a call from here. People expect God to constantly act. It's not. What are you doing in order to engage God in the changes that you would like to create in your life, in your personal life, or in the life of the community? It is possible that as a result of our work with immigration, God will maybe turn the heart of the one man who hates it. So you have to draw God by the authenticity of the actions here on earth. That's how God comes and gets involved. God has so many other things to do during the day. Have you seen the schedule of God today? I mean, it's a long list. You're important, but hey, maybe there's a cry that comes out from a whole different geographical location that is more powerful than ours at this moment. Maybe we got lazy about our intensity of prayer. Maybe we forgot the language. Maybe we are not here as often or any other place. I'm just suggesting that there is a need for the call to come from here. That's how they talked about the world. So back to the text.
It disperses only in sound and speech, using the distinct vessels of lungs, the organs of articulation, and the windpipe. In the move from speech to physical deed, the separation proceeds yet farther.
So they got a lot more complicated. They actually suggested that every part of your body has to play the symphony of the worship. So, the lungs, definitely we know that that child has good lungs in expressing. I wonder if God is here just because of the cry of the baby. Who knows? So there are things that are there in the lower world, in our world, but things here are more fragmented. That's why we have difficulty understanding sometimes. Huge concepts, huge philosophical ideas. But in the world up, things are not as fragmented as the world here. So we need also to achieve a tikkun, a mending. That's what tikkun olam means in Hebrew. Tikkun olam in Hebrew, olam is world, tikkun is the mending of the world. There is a lot more of mending that needs to take place in a fragmented world that we all live in before it can be united, in the same unity that is up there. There's unity up there. There's fragmentation down here. We needed to accept this from the moment of creation. Have you seen fragmented things down here? Oh my God. How hard it is sometimes to create unity of concept, of unity between people, or unity in a family. It's a lot of work down here. Up there, but we're not there. Maybe we are. There is definitely an option for us to get there. And this is the climbing on the runs. I mean, the Jacob's stairway to heaven exists always. The possibility is there to climb up, to climb up, to climb up. And to be careful not to fall down. That's where the fragmentation takes place. When we can understand one thing that leads to the other. When everything looks sporadically and without any connections. Everything is connected, guys. Everything is connected. God will not create a world that is a mishmash. Maybe we are the one creating a mishmash in the world. In a good deli in New York, mishmash is the soup that you need to ask for. Because that soup has, come on. Everything. Everything. It has a little bit of the, first of all, it has the noodles. Matzah ball, and then what else?
A knedel.
Knedel. I mean, you have everything in the deli. I'm sorry, the deli across the street is not part to that level of mishmash. But this is not what God created. There was some unity, and I think part of the mishmash is us. A big part, like 99%. I still want to have God feel guilty for something. So, I mean, this is the difference between this world and the world to come, whatever it is, whatever you want to define it. That's why there's no reason to fear. It is possible that the world to come is a beautiful world that we all need to experience. So then our fear of death, maybe we should minimize it. Maybe it's okay, who knows? Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that there is something else, that it's not just this world. There's something else. I don't know how to define it, how to call it, but you know what? If you want to see your mother there, why not? Or you want to see grandparents? Why not? Why can't we believe in that kind of a world? Oh my God, it gives such a calmness to our lives. I need to create a world to come where they're fighting and war and all the books that you guys have in your Christian Bible that we, thank God, don't have. I mean, you go and you sit in evangelical church and you are dumbfounded. How are they capable of creating all the crap? Why would I live in that kind of a world? I mean, I'm sorry if I depressed anyone here. But I want to live in a world of happiness and joy and hope. Hope. Let's continue.
But in a person of true heart, there's no such separation even in the lower realm. Such a person sees the entirety of life, the full self, comes from above. Without its upper root, it would not exist at all. Therefore, the same unity that exists above should be present here too.
That's two. Remember again, we are living in a fragmented world that needs a lot of work. A lot of work. This church is doing a lot of work. We need to roll its sleeves and try to bring unity to this world. Only then there will be a serious bridge between the unity from above and the unity here. How are we doing? You know, how do we create unity on this world? It's a full-time job. Just to keep unity in one family is so hard. I mean, do you have to have families of brothers not talking to each other in 30 years? Why is it so hard? And you can definitely, all of us have those fragmented pieces in our life. And we need to work on this. And so there are people who their world is more peaceful as a result of being able to accomplish that unity in their own families, in their own lives. Continue.
No attention is paid to the seemingly different vessels, since they are distinct only as receptacles of the same essence. Thus upper and lower worlds are joined, and the person is able to ascend from rung to rung, reaching the very top where all is a simple unity.
Above there is a simple unity. It doesn't take any struggle. So definitely the world of the mystics, two worlds, parallel worlds. What's happening there needs to happen here. That's how they saw the world. And they saw a lot of those stairways. I mean, I don't know if you don't see it. I see it here. I see it in front of me, stairways and people coming up and down, up and down. That's how you need to look at the world. And the upper you go, the higher you go, the more unity you achieve. And maybe if you get there, you don't have to use your therapist anymore. I'm just kidding. I'm doing it for your sake. No, But why are we going to therapists? To achieve unity in our lives. Hopefully that's what their work is. They are agents, they are messengers. They don't know that they are messengers from above. But that's what they're doing. Yes?
But the eternal dialectic always keeps them between the is and the are.
Totally.
So never escape.
Never escape, yeah. I'm more optimistic. I'm more optimistic. I think a sincere work can achieve a better unity. I don't know if it's 100%, but I'll be happy with 60%. This is the beautiful poem that was written by Rabbi Kushner about the pieces of the puzzle. I think I mentioned maybe before that all our lives are pieces of a puzzle. Our life is a puzzle. None of us is capable of assembling the puzzles of our life to 100%. There'll be always pieces missing. And we'll try to put them there, but they are not going to go. I remember having those 10,000 pieces and getting so frustrated and then pushing a piece in the wrong place for half an hour and it didn't go in. I twisted it, I made it fit at the end, but it wasn't the piece. And so the way we accomplish and fulfill our pieces of the puzzle is by encountering each other. There are people in this room that have pieces to the puzzle of someone else.
Amen.
And the issue is how we provide them. So the pieces that belong to someone else that are in me, they are no value to me. I need to be able to dispense them. I need to find, that's why the connections, that's why humanity is all connected. And I think the place where we're going to go, the place where your church is going to be ready in Christmas, inshallah, amen. It will be an amazing project of putting pieces of puzzles together for the first time. That excites me. And some of those puzzles will be for the sake of understanding our religions, and many of them will benefit all of us. All of us. Because the unity is not unity of only relationship, but unity of thought. Of what are we doing here? Do we all know what we're doing here? What is the purpose of my creation? Why am I here? Some of us are working on this for years. Sometimes alone, but it's a lot easier to work with other people. That's why for sins against God, the Day of Atonement atones. But for transgressions or sins, I'm using those words, the Day of Atonement doesn't atone. For our relationship, nothing atones until we ask forgiveness. Until we understand the depth of the difficulty we brought to someone else or the difficulty that I'm experiencing as a result of a relationship. By the way, you don't wait till someone asks forgiveness for you or say sorry. You go and pursue that person. Have some courage. Have some courage. You know what? My relationship with you is terrible. Let's go for a cup of coffee. And we need to take some initiative in healing relationships that we know are terrible with other people. Not to wait for them to come to us. What's wrong in us going to them? It is possible they feel the gap, but don't have the courage to come to us. So we go to them. I know it takes courage. It's not easy. But we need to change some of the way we behave in order to achieve a better unity in our lives. That's what's missing, yes.
And if you get rebuffed, continue to pursue?
For a while, yeah, what's wrong? What else you have to do? I mean, yeah.
You want me to give you a list?
We already got God's list.
There is something in Judaism, in Jewish writing, that you go 3 times, and if the person doesn't want, so the transgression is on their head. I hate it. I hate this.
3 times.
Yeah, 3 times. I'll go for 4th and 5th. You know, you have to be generous. Okay, let's continue. Next paragraph. This is why Torah Come on.
This is why the Torah tells us that Moses refused to rescue Israel from Egypt on his own.
Yeah. You don't know this, but I mean, why did he do it? What was the purpose of Moses in Egypt?
Messenger.
I mean, what?
Messenger.
The messenger, yeah, but he couldn't do it by himself. It wasn't something that human being can do. And he actually, he refused to take the prophecy. I mean, he argued with God about being the messenger. Every one of the prophets, it's definitely a prerequisite. Every prophet has to say to God, "Screw you. I'm not going there. I'm not doing it." That's the story of prophecy. Until they get it. Just a second. Go on.
It was not for naught, but was a reasoned view. Moses represents love alone, quote, "For I drew him from the water."
Chesed.
Meaning love.
The word chesed. Chesed in Hebrew is grace in the language that is used in this church. Chesed. Go on.
Meaning love and joy. That is why he was heavy of speech, because the mouth restrains and shapes our form of self-expression. Moses had no such restraint, only joy, but God's self was to be revealed here, requiring restraint as well as love. Therefore God said to him, "But your brother Aaron, the Levite, the one of restraint, will serve as your mouth."
Okay, let me explain now. Now you're getting into the 10 emanations of God's presence. I'm sure every one of you saw a map of that God. That's part of the Kabbalah teaching. So God exists in 10 different emanations. Right side, left side, it's complicated. We're not there yet. I don't know if we'll get there, but it's complicated. But anyway, the two emanations that God appears is in joy and love. Love is definitely known to you. I hear the word love in this church a lot. It's part of the lingo of expressing the relationship between people in this congregation and God. It's something that is still strange for Jewish members of the community who come to the church, because you don't hear a lot of language about love in our synagogues. Am I right? It's there. We know it. We don't talk about this. But we know that we will not be here if it wasn't for the love of God for humanity. We know that. But we don't talk about this, similar to the way the New Testament and some of the disciples of Jesus are talking about him. You guys will have to teach us about love in that concept. That's how you're coming closer to us, physically. I mean, there will be work for you to do among Jews and Muslims. By the way, it's not going to be easy. But don't forget what is the larger goal of the tri-faith, which is to be able to speak to each other in language that we can understand. Because things are so fragmented at this moment that we need to create a larger unity. So part of your job will be to teach us. I spoke to your two clergy. I would like to see your clergy once a week spend 2 hours in a mosque or 2 hours in a synagogue. The same way you accepted me here. I mean, this is a revolutionary idea. When I talk to my colleagues that I'm a scholar in resident in a church, they think I've flipped out. That kind of institution don't happen in America. So, and the imam already agreed that he will spend 2 hours at synagogue. So people can come and ask anything they want, and he can teach. I think it will be great to do it. It will take some work to get there, but that's the beauty of retirement. I can think about this all the time. It's on my mind all the time. Back to the need for Aaron. So Aaron the Levite, Aaron the priest. So the Levite means restrain. Why? Why is the word Levite mean restrain? What was the role of the Levites?
They were the priests.
They were the priests, and they are the one that drew the line on the sand. They were the one that restrained the Israelites from going in all kind of different ways without paying attention to the relationship to God. They are the one in charge of our rituals, our obligations, the commandments, the fulfillment of the commandments. The book of Leviticus is their book. It's written by the P document, the priestly document. So the Aaron is the restraint. Moses, on the other hand, is not yet about love, but there's a joy. So Moses symbolizes in the scheme of the 10 emanations of God as joy. You have to have the joy, but you have to have the restraint. That's what happened in the exile from Egypt. What happened? What was the purpose of getting out of the darkness? To discover joy, because you can be joyous if you're a slave, but also to remember that you're going to get to a mountain that will offer you also restraint. If they didn't get to the mountain, they will never hear the commandments. Sinai is more important than Egypt. We have 2 holidays, and I don't think many of my people, you get it. The holiday that comes 50 days after Passover is the more important holiday that we don't know how to celebrate. It's called Shavuot. Shavuot is the holiday that celebrates the receiving and the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Passover, we all know, Passover is celebrated heavily by Jews. When it comes to Shavuot, you barely see them in a synagogue. Yeah. Yeah, they come for the blintzes because of the milk. By the way, paradise was all about milk. There was no meat and no Omaha steaks in paradise. So one way to celebrate the sweetness of the Torah is by eating blintzes. You know what they are? Yeah. We'll have more of those tasting here in the Tri-Faith. I love that. I love the tasting piece. But I also like the interaction that takes place in the mind. So we need, next to the sharing food, we need to also share text, share learning, scholarship. That's what we need to do. That's the next step. So those two emanations of God, the joy and the restraint, is something that needs to be understood as tools to lead to a unity. That's why they're there. And the last piece, the last paragraph.
He met him at the mountain of God.
Yeah, so there's a phrase that Moses met God in the mountain of God. It's so interesting. Until then, where was God always? In all of your Roman and Greek studies that you spend so much time in high school, I mean, the mountain is where God's are. That was the last time that our God was on the mountain. From then on, what happens to God? The Jewish view. What happens to God after the meeting with God on the mountain? What happens? You carry him with you. I am among you. I'm in the midst of you. No more God on top of mountains, but God in the middle of a community. So you go to a Jewish synagogue, what do you have there? You have an ark. What's inside the ark? God. God is inside the ark. Although there were some children that thought that I sleep there. It was bizarre. There was a whole different theology that was extremely dangerous. Rabbi, where are you sleeping? You're sleeping in the ark. No, I'm not. I have a home. That was a break. Mountains, please continue.
Mountain stands for love, like that of Abraham, whom God called a mountain.
Yeah, so Abraham is known in the name, in the mystical world, as mountain. Why is Abraham call a mountain. And why is the mountain of Abraham? We know what happened there. What happened there? What happened in the mountain that he took his son Isaac? Nothing happened. But his devotion showed the love he had for God. So Abraham is called in mystical text mountain. So after a while, you discover that there's a language to the mystical work that you need to develop the vocabulary to understand this. Because when you start reading it and you see mountain, it's Abraham. A place where, by the way, there's mountains in the New Testament too. I mean, the speech on the mountain. Love. So it's mountain, and mountain can be also love. Because what was given on the top of the mountain, the attempt to sacrifice Isaac and show complete devotion, it's love. What God gave us on the mountain is love too. Because it creates, hopefully, the tools for unity in our lives. Continue.
Elohim, the word used for God, represents judgment and restraint. The two of them met together and he kissed him. Their spirits were joined, becoming a simple unity.
Beautiful. So Elohim, you know the word Elohim. Elohim is the name for God. Gods, it's God plural, Elohim. It usually was a reference in the Old Testament, in the Jewish Bible, for other kind of gods. Egypt is the place where one God appears, the only God that exists. Pharaoh, that pretended to be a god, is a human god. One should have to defeat him regularly. There are pharaohs in our lives too that we need to defeat. We need to diminish them. There are those evil inclinations we have that are appearing like pharaohs. And we need to find a way to drown that evil inclinations. And we have all kind of seductions around us. What do we do with them? Those are, in a way, a new appearance of pharaohs in our lives. And so what is the mountain? What happened? Elohim, which is used for God, represents judgment. There is a judging God. That's why there was a need to create a different kind of God in the New Testament. The God in the New Testament is very different than the God of the Old Testament. There's judgment. Yeah.
When you talk about joy and restraint, restraint is telling us that we have to control self.
Yes.
Which means then we have to have pain.
And that's too bad.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, pain or suffering? I mean, pain? Pain, physical pain or pain? Is every time that we restrain ourselves is bringing us pain?
It brings us pain, then we have to generate control to release or feel that it's not making us too impatient or putting us into the hospital because we are impatient. So
Well, we can talk about this for the next 3 years. I like the word restrain. I don't think we practice it enough. We're definitely not practicing enough. And if restraint brings some pain as a result of it, good for us. Yeah. I don't want to get to the level of hospital.
no,
But I think that's something the American culture is not producing. Restraint needs to come from within. And so we have the tools in some of the commandments to help us restrain ourselves. So God who represents judgment and restraint, because God is the one who gave us the tools to do it, and they meet on the mountain. Moses, who is complete love of his people, and God, who is about to restrain. And definitely there is a love that God provides us also. But there was some kind of a meeting on the top of the mountain that created this amazing narrative and the amazing guidance. We will not know what to do as human beings if there was no Torah given to us. The Torah serves for us as a document of restraint. We are told there how to behave with the widow, with the orphaned, with the fatherless. I mean, the Torah is an amazing book of instructions that help us to get over some of our animal behavior by giving us some tools for restraint. So the Torah is not the law. Sometimes the Torah was called by Christian theologians the law. The 10 Commandments are actually not commandments. They are 10 utterings of God. Aseret adibrot. Aseret adibrot means the 10 uttering, the 10 words, or the 10 utterings of God. When we don't like to talk about commandments, we talk about utterings. But there is, if you have a relationship to a commander, then you need to take those words commanded seriously. There is a relationship between someone who is commanded and the commander. What is that relationship? How do we use that relationship to help us achieve a greater unity in our life? We're not going to achieve 100% unity. Forget it. But we can definitely rise in making our life more calm, more quiet, more peaceful. Yes?
It depends on if the commander is doing it in love or if the commander is doing it in force.
That was Pharaoh. This is why we have God. God won the war between a commander, someone who is, we have a lot of people who look at themselves as gods. I think God's involvement was completely out of love. And love for us, because he gave us tools to restrain ourselves. Where are we going to get them? Where would we find the tools to restrain ourselves? Look at some of the stuff that we are constantly bombarded on the TV screens. What restraint? What restraint? Everything we see on TV is the opposite. Everything we read is the opposite. Every magazine is the opposite. I think the Torah is a wonderful vehicle for all of us. That's what you guys adopted the Old Testament to. You are not complete without embracing the Old Testament. The New Testament has only a piece of the truth. And we Jews need to read the New Testament. We are doing a lousy job in knowing it. We don't know anything about it. I thank God I went to the seminary, so I spent 3 years in learning the New Testament, which I still have difficulty understanding. That's why it's fantastic sometimes to come to this church or other churches and to hear what you do with the parables of Jesus. But in a way, Jesus serves an amazing role of uniting us. He was one of our boys. Where would you guys be without a Jewish kid? So we need to talk about this freely, without intimidation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.